Alright, this week I'm actually going to expand on my cardio video I did a while back, and I'm going to go kind of like more in depth and talk about things like resting heart rate, max heart rate, VO2 max. Now, I came across an article from the Cleveland Clinic, and this article, like I'll do like with all the other articles, is I'll link it in the comment section and everything so people can actually go check this out and everything. So this one is like a .org site, so it's like the source is pretty good. Like I've said before, is with being .org, it's going to be like a better source than like your .coms and everything. So of course, you may not necessarily want to dismiss .coms though. So like because those .coms does give you ideas and everything, but those tend to be more opinion based and everything versus like your .orgs and .govs and stuff. So this one, like I said, is from the Cleveland Clinic, so it's like clevelandclinic.org. So this one actually gets into like a much more in depth on like things like talking about like your max heart rate. So like one of the things that like you'll come across is the like I said, the max heart rate. So the calculator that most people are probably familiar with, or that you'll come across, is for your max heart rate is like they'll say like a 220 minus your age. So someone like me, as of this recording, being 42, according to that, my max heart rate would be 178. Of course, it's not as necessarily as simple as that. So this one actually gets into like what's called the Karvonen, Krvonen, the Karvonen formula, and that gets much more in depth and everything. So, and like also it gets into the different zones of cardio and everything. So like it starts off like zone 2, which would be about like 60% or so, 57 to 63% or so of like your max heart rate, and then you go up to zone 3 would be 64 to 76. Zone 4 would be 77 to 95, and zone 5 would be 96 to 100. So like as you go up in zones, the intensity obviously goes up and everything. So like for instance, like most like stuff that I've actually come across and starting to apply and everything, like usually like they tend to focus on zone 2 and 4. So like zone 2, like I figure like okay, like you do like a warm-up, or like you're doing like light intensity stuff, like would be more like that. So like you're sitting there maybe on like the treadmill, or like the Stepmaster or something, like you're in zone 2, like when you're doing something like that, and you can sit here and talk back and forth like what I'm doing with this video. Now zone 4 would be like a near max effort and everything. So like what would be a good example would be like HIIT training. So like for instance, like I've talked about the HIIT training and that. So like you go like do like a minute sprint, so you jack up your heart rate to like a near maximum and everything, but then you come back down and type of deal. So like a minute off, minute on type of deal, or like any type of ratios to kind of get like yourself think of sort of like sprints or something. Like the max zone 5 would pretty much be like you're redlining and you're going all out. So like think like sprints, but like think of it like a sprint as in like a competition. Like you're at the Olympics and you're trying to like do like the 100-meter dash, and you're like a Usain Bolt, and you're trying to break your own world record of like 9.8 seconds or whatever his world record is. That'd be kind of like an all-out effort. So like zone 4 would be slightly a little less than that, but like with the max heart rate, like with the 220 minus your age is kind of like a general guideline. So like it would probably be like a good baseline for like especially for people that are just starting out with training and everything. So and like everything, it's kind of like a spectrum and everything. So you kind of have to look where you're at in the spectrum. So like are you someone who's obese, morbidly obese, or like maybe you're just like overweight, or like maybe you're someone like regardless on the BMI scale where you're at, are you someone who's untrained? So then like that 220 minus your age would be a good starting point to like be able to figure out, okay, so okay, here's what this is saying. I don't want to maybe jack up like using myself as an example with the 178 max heart rate. you might like, okay, well, I don't want to jack it up above that and everything once you start again starting out, but where that like general calculation of the 220 minus your age kind of falls by the wayside is like if you start getting into training and everything, and like you've been trained for several months or maybe like several years, that not doesn't necessarily kind of like hold true to you. So this is where the Carbonin formula comes into play. So this the article actually has the whole the math and like the formula behind it. So like it takes into account like your not only your max heart rate but also like your resting heart rate. So like someone like me who has a resting heart rate of around 54 is a lot better. Would be a lot like putting this into front would be like a lot better than someone who's maybe untrained. Like they maybe have like a 70 beats per minute for resting heart rate. So you can plug in everything into this formula and everything, and like get into much more depth and everything. So like if you're like someone who's definitely into like the nitty gritty details and everything, this does provide you with the information to be able to do that. And so it also does talk about like your VO2 max. Now, your VO2 max is pretty much like your lung capacity, so how much how like in a sense like it's a good test of how strong your lungs are and everything. So your endurance athletes like your cyclists who would maybe like, get into like the Tour de France, or like your Ironman competitors, like your marathon runners, those people tend to have like a high VO2 max, and like of course like your strength athletes might have lower VO2 max, but there is ways to like measure like to increase that and like measure that and everything. So, and I'm pretty sure it was Andrew Huberman, but don't quote me on that. That said that VO2 max is also like a good indication of overall health too. So you're probably going to have to check that out and everything. So because I don't know off the top of my head who exactly said that, but like that's where the VO2 max comes into play too. So like now this whole article, like I said, it gets like way into like detail like of the formulas and like on the that Carbonin formula that I mentioned, and like it gets into much more depth and much more broad aspect of your actual cardio health and everything. So again, like it depends on where like you fall on the spectrum and everything. So like if you're just starting out, like the 220 minus your age would be a good starting point. But like as you progress and get more into training and get more physically fit and everything, you're going to want something more accurate. Like so, this is where like the Carbonin formula that I keep mentioning comes in handy. So like, and of course, it's not necessarily like the article. It's like think of like the Pirates. It's not necessarily rule. It's more of like a guideline. So like for instance, like again back to like the max heart rate of like 220 minus your age, and that was. I'll use myself example. Like this last week when I was like at the end of my strength training workouts, I would do sprints, and now the equipment that I use, like the treadmills and like the ellipticals and everything, they do have like the heart monitors that you can use. Those aren't like necessarily 100% accurate, but they do give you a decent like ballpark figure and like a data point. So like if like you like with me doing a sprint at the end of my strength training workout, like using the heart rate monitors, I'd be like doing like a quick like maybe like a 5 minute, like a 3-4 maybe 5 minute sprint at the end. I'd be jacking up my heart rate close to like 180, 190, maybe even 200. So like that max heart rate about like 178 is like, well, hey, you're going above your max heart rate and everything. So like you want to use that as like I said, a guideline to like, okay, as like a safety measure. Like, okay, like I'm just starting out with training, I may not necessarily want to jack my heart rate up above that, like or like, okay, I've been training, I want to try and test myself, do it every so often, but don't sit there and like redline every single day. You like getting back to like the 7 pillars, so like with pillar number 4 with recovery, you don't want to sit there and, like I said, redline yourself day after day after day, because you're not giving yourself enough time to recover. So it's like one of those things maybe you want to do like once a week or whatever. So like and of course, if you jack your heart rate up, like with myself, like 178, if you jack it up above, is it going to be like, oh no, you can't do that? Like, again, it's like a guideline. Like, okay, like it's a good way to test it and everything, to see like to push it and maybe see if you can the VO2 max, see if you can try and increase that as well. So, like I said, this whole article gets into like the details and like gives you like a formula to be able to like better track it and give you more data, so like you can like in sense increase like your efficiency of your training. So having as much data and like as many data points as possible is always a good thing, so that way you can sit there and like, okay, like think of like yourself as like you're the scientist, you're the test subject. You want to run like a science, like in a sense, a science experiment on yourself, and like this gives you more data points in that science experiment. So that way, like you have like more like points of like, okay, well, like I tried this a couple months ago. Let me see, like let me go from here and like kind of like draw from this and everything. So that this article just further expands on like cardio health and like gives you more information on like the importance of the cardio. So like it's, and of course everything is just not one aspect. So this is just another like a reference point for people to use to be able to, okay, here's another article to get into. So like I said, this article is like gets more in depth than what I did on the previous cardio video I did several months ago.